Hi, I'm Fazia Costi. I'm the owner of 54 Media Group. It is my honor to present to you the Focus on Success Summit 2024. We have an amazing lineup for you, and we hope that you enjoy each and every one of our presentations. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, my name is Marlee Strawn, and I am here to help you land the job without the experience. Now, full transparency, I don't consider myself any particular type of expert, but I will say that when I reflect back on my career, I definitely have landed some jobs that I didn't have the experience for, and some would probably even argue didn't have the qualifications for. And reflecting, I feel like I can share with you some of my key takeaways and my tips and tricks, and it will help you along your journey. So let's get started. On the agenda today, I have a quick introduction about my background. I'll give you tips on how to overcome the experience gap, being in charge of your own professional development, and how to build credibility. And I'll leave you with 3 key takeaways. So let's get into it. I have almost 2 decades of experience in education, but I'm currently the co-founder and head of education of Scholar Education. So we're an EdTech platform located in Florida, and our program uses AI to help teachers with creating a personalized learning environment for students. My career started at 21. I was a high school history teacher. I went to grad school quickly. I became an assistant principal at the age of 26, and I landed my first principal role at 30. Now, this principalship was unique because it was actually the founding principal role. And what that ultimately means is that I was building something from scratch. And this experience was really a crash course into leadership and problem solving. And, at the end of the day, that charter school became the #1 performing charter school in the district. And I'm really proud of what we accomplished. And I think all of my success in my career really has to do with I was always the hardest working person in the room, and honestly, just grit. And this is where I would like to share a little bit about my background, because I think that when I say my background, I mean like my childhood. Because at the end of the day, I feel like people hear stories like this and assume that this person has it all figured out and has always had it all figured out. And I really want to be transparent and let you know that when I was a teacher, I didn't necessarily say I want to be a assistant principal by 26, or I'm going to be a principal by 30. Like, I didn't have vision boards, and I wasn't sitting in my room manifesting. At the end of the day, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do. I became a teacher because honestly, I loved learning and I wanted to be a teacher that helped others want to learn. I didn't really think about like my long-term career goals. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just telling you that I did not have it all figured out. What I did know though is that I always thought to myself that if I did my best at where I am currently, and if I was the hardest working person in the room and I learned as much as I possibly could in that role and did went above and beyond in that role, that it was going to help me in my next step. And I think that honestly started in my childhood. I grew up with a single mom and we struggled. I mean, making ends meet is saying it nicely. Um, my mother was working multiple jobs. I was home alone all the time. I didn't have anybody like sitting there telling me, you got to do good in school and you got to get good grades and you got to go to college. And at the end of the day, I could have failed miserably and I would have be in a very different place. But for me, I told myself, how can I get out of, how can I not be in the same financial situation when I'm an adult? I was always kind of mature in that way where I was like, I don't want to do this when I grow up. What can I do differently? And something told me that it was going to be to hard work. So in school, that's where this kind of like grit and drive began, even at a very young age. And I told myself that I'm going to try my best in school so that I can go to college, and then college is going to be my next step. So I did that. I tried my best in school. I got a scholarship. I also worked full time at a very young age because I had to pay for everything. And I just kept telling myself that this is all going to pay, it's going to make it worth it in the long run. But I just want to share that not everybody has like these big goals and have it all figured out. Some people are just working hard and making it happen. And I think that that's kind of my story at the end of the day. So I'm going to move on to my first quote. And I like this quote. I can't take credit for it. I told you that I've created an AI platform. So I went into ChatGPT and I asked it to create a quote on imposter syndrome and embracing imposter syndrome. And I think today, imposter syndrome is like a very popular thing, especially in social media, viral concept, where it's like, it's kind of breathing light into it as it's a positive thing. And I feel like we really should embrace imposter syndrome because honestly, at the end of the day, everybody has felt imposter syndrome at some point. Some feel it more than others, but all it really is that you feel outside of your comfort zone. And when you're outside of your comfort zone, that's a sign that you're pushing yourself and you're growing. So this quote, thank you, ChatGPT, for helping me create this. But it's a sign that you're really just going outside of your comfort zone and pushing your limits, and that's a good thing. So, and I've felt this many, many times. And I think that at the end of the day, embracing it is going to be the key to your success. So here are some of my tips and tricks I want to start out with. So I told you I started out as a classroom teacher, and this is really not about me, but I want to tell you some of the things that I did along the way to help you on your own journey. So I was a classroom teacher, 21 years old, zero experience. And right off the bat, I told myself that I was going to take on as many leadership roles that I possibly could. So examples of those things. Now, I told myself these leadership roles would help me and build skills that I didn't have. I was 21. Some of my high school students were 18. I felt like a fish out of water. I was not comfortable doing these things, but I always kind of like said, if I do this, it's going to work itself out and I'm going to gain something out of it. So some of the things that I would do is I volunteered to be in charge of student government. Student government is like the school-wide organization that plans events. And when you're planning events for a huge school population, obviously you're learning event planning and project management and budgeting. These were all skills that I thought, okay, these would be good skills. Whatever my next role is going to be, I can take those skills and apply it to somewhere else. Another thing that I was super uncomfortable with my first year teaching is as a teacher, you have to be evaluated, where your administration comes into your classroom and they evaluate you. And it's, sometimes it can be punitive and it's stressful, like having somebody come in and watch you and critique you. And that year, it just so happened that they were rolling out a new evaluation system. So the principal shared with the team that they were going to be doing what they called calibration observations, which would be non-punitive. And essentially, all they would be doing is coming into your classroom as a group of administrators, and they would be evaluating you at the same time and then comparing notes to make sure that they were on the same page. And that seemed really scary because you would have all of your administration coming in at one point. And don't get me wrong, it was very, very intimidating. But I thought to myself that this was a great opportunity for me to volunteer my classroom because I would have free feedback coming at me. So I rose my hand and I said, feel free to come into my classroom at any point. And therefore, I would have all of my administration. And honestly, I even had district employees coming in, complete strangers coming in, giving me feedback, which was tough to hear, not going to lie, but it wasn't punitive. So at the end of the day, I was able to take that feedback. And then when it was time for my real observation, that was going to determine my evaluation if I was highly effective or whatnot, I had tons of free feedback and I was able to take that and apply it. And honestly, as a first year teacher, I was highly effective. I think there was one of two teachers in the whole school that was highly effective. And honestly, I would have only been able to do that if because of that, volunteering myself to put myself in that situation. And I think that lends itself to the volunteering for growth. So there were things like the student government that I would volunteer for. And then there were things like this evaluation that I would volunteer for. But then there were other things too, like I was teaching a advanced placement class and I organized a county-wide test prep session that any student in the entire district could come to because I thought to myself, it's going to put my name out there as a leader in this, in AP World History. And if I'm helping more kids, great. So this is another example of just like really trying to think to yourself, like, how can I take the initiative to gain experience, A, and then B, put myself into challenging situations so that when I am going to my next step, whether you have that figured out or not, you can reflect back and say, these are the things I did in my current role, and this is how it will apply to this next role. And you're proving your drive, right? You're proving that you are the type to take initiative. As a principal who I hired, lots of people, sat in hundreds and hundreds of interviews. That was honestly something I was always looking for, is who is going to always go above and beyond, and who's going to go that extra degree. It's always those people who move the needle. And that's what I always try to strive for. So those are some of like my reflections back on my teaching career. And then that kind of leads me into my next quote. At the end of the day, the only limits you have are the ones that you place on yourself. Again, ChatGPT helps me identify these quotes, but there really are no excuses. You can't say I don't have the experience or I don't know how to do that. I mean, in today's world, like there is literally no excuses not to learn something. So my next tip is being self-directed in your growth. One of the other things that I'm very much committed to is I listen to all the podcasts. I'm reading books. I'm following the experts on whatever it is in that field. So let's fast forward in my career and give you some examples here. I go through, I'm a teacher, I'm proving myself through leadership roles and putting myself out there, really taking myself out of my comfort zone to try to gain experiences that I wouldn't have if I was just teaching, every single day. And then I get my master's and I'm like, all right, I want to become an assistant principal. All right. Well, how am I going to get that job without, because I don't have the experience? I just have this classroom experience. I applied for jobs. My resume was not being looked at because at the end of the day, I didn't have the experience. And I told myself if I got the opportunity to just sit in a room, I knew I would nail it. And I knew that I would be highly considered just because I would lean into the fact that I have taken the initiative to do all of these extra things. Now, along the way, I'm also listening to self-improvement things, interviewing strategy, following all of the schools that I would like to work at, following them on social media and LinkedIn and sending them emails, even though they're not looking at my resume, like really putting myself out there. So I finally got a job interview and it was for assistant principal of curriculum. And at the time I was 26 years old. I had only been teaching for 5 years, and assistant principal curriculum is basically the step down from principal. And I thought, this is my dream job at the time. And if I could land this role, this would be amazing. I'm sitting in a room full of people who clearly have many, many more years, 20 plus probably more years of experience in education, whether that was direct experience or just classroom experience nonetheless. And I went into that interview and I just leaned into all of the things that I did outside of my classroom that would help me be good at being an assistant principal of curriculum. And I leaned into all of the things I had heard about in podcasts, all of the things I've read about in books, all of the things that I read in blogs, all of these things that I had been kind of immersing myself into. And I left that room, which was a boardroom full of about 10 people, super intimidating. And I called my husband and I said, if I don't get that job, it's only because I don't have actual experience. And I got the job. Now, I really leaned into the fact that I knew I didn't have the experience. And that's why I overcame all of those things by going and doing all of this self-initiated improvement. And I really leaned into the fact that in the modern world, there are no excuses not to know how to do something because of the internet, right? We can learn anything at any point. We have the world at our fingertips, literally. So that led me to, 26 years old, assistant principal of curriculum. Fast forwarding to 30 years old, I've been an assistant principal for about 4 years. I'm reading an article about a new high school that was going to be created and what their mission was. And I read this article and I said to myself, I want to be the principal of that school. I found an email online and I emailed saying, hi, my name is Marlee Strawn. I am the current assistant principal here. These are all the things I'm currently doing in my role as assistant principal that aren't typically assistant principal roles. I was doing the same thing, learning things that my principal was doing along the way. And this is why I feel like I would be a good candidate for this principalship. There were over 200 people interested in this principalship. I landed the role because, again, I took the initiative to say all of the things that I wouldn't have done in a traditional assistant principal role. Became the principal of that school, created that school from scratch, built it, it was literally dirt from the ground up. We started with just a group of 9th graders, moved up, had our first graduating class, the only school in the entire district with a 100% graduation rate, because along the way, I was hiring people who had the same drive as me. Now, forwarding to Scholar Education. So I am the co-founder and I am the head of education. And at the end of the day, what I do every single day is I am leading a development team without a technical background. So I am creating a tech platform, and I have never coded a thing in my life. And I think this is a really good example of being self-directed in your growth and having no excuses. Because here I am every single day for the last year. I've built an AI platform with my development team, who's also new at developing with AI. And I have zero technical background. And all I did was immerse myself in reading, researching, following all of the experts on LinkedIn, blogs, you name it, so that I could go back to my development team and just ask the right questions. Ask them the right types of questions so that they could use their technical background to answer them, to say, yes, we can build that, or yes, we can't. And at the end of the day, I just feel like there are no excuses to not you don't have to be an expert, but you can know enough to get the job done. And that's essentially what I'm doing at Scholars. I'm using my education experience to build a platform, but I'm leading the development team with zero technical experience just because I've researched about the technical language and how to ask them questions. And I've just researched to know a little bit about how the technology works and how the coding and engineering works on the back end, so that I can come to that conversation informed enough to guide them. Moving on to my last quote. I've said believe fake it till you make it a lot in my career, kind of as a joke, but because honestly, I feel that if you believe in fake it till you make it, it's because you build confidence by doing things you didn't think you could. So by putting yourselves in situations where you feel like you're an imposter or you're faking it, when you come out of it on the other side, you feel you have a sense of confidence and accomplishment. Going back to the development, when I left my high school and I started joining development meetings, I felt like a fish out of water. I'm like, I have no idea. It's like they're speaking a different language. So I said to myself, well, if they sound like they're speaking a different language, I need to go figure out what that language is. And that's what I started with. Okay, let's start with researching technical talk so that I can communicate and not feel overwhelmed in these conversations. So when you feel like you are an imposter, when you feel like you're faking it, look at that as a sign that you're really headed in the right direction. And these are my 3 conclusions. Always plan for the next step, even when you don't know what it is. So that's what I'm saying with, I didn't know necessarily I wanted to be an assistant principal or I wanted to be a principal. Honestly, I never thought in a million years I'd be leading a development team. But I did know that I was going to be the hardest working person in the room. I was going to take the initiative to learn as much as I possibly could about that role. I was going to try to be the best at that role too. And it eventually was going to help me no matter what my next step is. Commit to being relentless in your own self-development. There are no excuses. Podcasts, blogs, books. I mean, the world is your oyster now because of technology to just learn whatever you want to learn. And when you go into that interview and you don't have the experience or the qualifications like I did many, many times, you can use all of those examples of you taking the initiative to build credibility. It's going to show your character that you're hardworking. You won't have to say when you're sitting in an interview, I'm a hardworking person. You won't have to say that because it's going to be proven through all of the steps that you took to initiate your own personal growth. I hope this was really helpful for you. Like I said, I don't have it all figured out, but I do think that at the end of the day, if I were aware of these things along the way, I probably would have had a lot less stress and a lot less sleepless nights. So I'm hoping by sharing with you my journey, it will help you. If you want to connect, here is my email. And of course, follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your time.